to this computer. Cool. All right. Looking at the roadmap, what's upcoming? Unsurprisingly, it's more dark mode. Big reveal there. I know. The thing that I wanted to share is um, I'm starting to try to get down exactly which groups we want to work with to make sure that the experience is really good for them. So recall that our exit criteria for the experimental release is that like designers for these key pages are satisfied with the experience. A lot of these areas are some of the most impactful and important areas of the business, so they're likely to be fairly busy. So we're going to have to give them some fairly hands-on support. So I'm trying to get lined up exactly what those groups are going to be, which groups we're going to focus on, so that we can start having those conversations in the next milestone about coordinating and collaborating. The list here is long. We won't support that many. I'm trying to nail down specifically like which of the, however many groups that we want to prioritize. Um, One thing to note, ignore all the numbers in that issue for the moment. I need to work with our product analyst to confirm the counts there. Um, but I think kind of directionally, those are some of the top groups that we'll be looking to partner with. All right. Looking over at the active projects, how's all the design token stuff going? This could be on
I
the,
can go. I
yeah,
can go
then.
first. We are making good progress on the UI kit. Um, we moved from, I don't know, when was the last time we spoke? Uh, we moved from doing some refactor and applying to just applying we're flying through those. Things are looking, or the my current plan is soft launch dark mode in the UI kit at the end of this milestone. So basically, turn it on but not tell anybody and see if it's all worked or not. No pressure. There's no panic in my voice then at all. I
Nah, it'll be
just had a
fine.
cough.
It'll be great. And so the idea is then anybody that's using the UI kit could just switch the modes and their designs, if they're using the components, would just update.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have fun. That's the happy path.
Yeah, exactly. It's so simple. Why do we fuss about this so much? It's so easy.
Uh, so yeah, but no, it's going well. The process of um reviewing the UI kit updates has uncovered some stuff that we missed in GitLab UI. So that's been
Ah,
really
okay.
helpful to just pull together quick MRs and go, oh yeah, this now that we're looking really even closer, um, some changes here and there. And it's really nice to know that once the just if the token definition just changes, then we don't need to touch it again in UI kit. It
Yeah.
just will arrive when it arrives, which is very lovely.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For those changes that we've missed in GitLab UI, are you opening MRs or issues or leaving comments somewhere? I want to make sure we catch those.
MRs,
Nice.
thankfully, all of the ones I've found so far are just small ones.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And on the dev side, I saw that the Epic is what, there's only a few issues still open?
Yes, on
James,
the dev
Vanessa, do you know?
side,
Yeah.
I am not actively working on some issues
Mhm.
because I think there are none really open which need action right now. But if
Okay.
there are, I will check again and also let me know if there are. Apart from that, I'm rather involved in merge requests, which I'm reviewing, which are more or less about also adding dark modes to it. And this is why I will jump to the point which is written down below GitLab CSS updates. So related to design tokens, I am almost finished the vendoring bootstrap CSS part. So it is finished, but we have to now merge it to all of the satellite projects.
Yeah.
And afterwards, we can do with Bootstrap CSS whatever we want. So, for example, I think we've written down the ideas of do something with this reboot CSS and just
Hmm.
see how it interferes with design tokens. And I realized again that Bootstrap CSS punches are important on everything.
Oh, that's
So it's
fun.
nice already when wherever we already removed some Bootstrap CSS utils, which we also already did, and just used our CSS classes, we could then yet again already in the GitLab repository remove some overridings, which also were important, um, which generally makes it then easier.
Yeah, that will definitely help in the long run.
Yes. And there was one component which we now removed in GitLab UI, which is the nav bar. So we don't need design tokens for it because it was
Excellent.
used nowhere. Now it's gone. And for Markdown, I don't know where the thread is right now, but Yannick gave an update that it is somewhere on his list how to do this with GL Markdown to move it into GitLab. Do whatever repository,
Yeah.
and then we would also don't need design tokens for that. And they also still use it just as a fallback legacy thingy, but cannot just remove it right now quickly. Um, I'm not sure if Dan, you still want to say something about it because last week you added a discussion point about the markdown last time.
Uh yeah. So um the some of the rich text styles, I'll call them rich text styles, but it kind of is what Markdown gets rendered into, and that .md class that gets applied throughout GitLab, which makes things look right, is in dark mode. It previously only had to work on white and light gray, but in dark mode, it's got to work on a bunch of different layers. And if these rich textiles are owned by the design system, cool, we create the design tokens for them. And if they're not, they don't belong to the design system, they aren't owned by the design system, then we need to work with that team to help them build some bespoke stuff to make it work everywhere. Rich textiles feels pretty foundational, pretty design systemy, but uh, I don't know how much more we want to be taking on today. So maybe it's a future a future thing. It's trade-offs all the way down.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I do agree that knowledge is probably going to be one of the first groups that we have to work with because they control the text editor and all of the markdown that's shown all over the place. Um, so they'll definitely be a good candidate. And since we've already had conversations with it, was it Himanshu? Um, Perhaps the pump is primed to be able to do some initial like exploration and first testing with them in the next milestone or two.
James?
Um, yeah, so I've just been working on my primary focus is on the text colors. Dan and I worked out a plan last week to like so we were trying to do a mass migration, but first we want to test a few of them to make sure they work properly. So I've been working on that today, but biggest issue is like working out which 10 will be easy to validate. Because sometimes the components have really difficult validation paths. So at the moment, I'm working on the secondary colors. I found 10 instances that are used in the GitLab storybook, which is great because it'll be a lot easier to validate. But the second one had a broken storybook, so it's just slow going.
Yeah, I mean, the extra caution is worth it here. So if we can figure out a way to do this safely, then hopefully everything else will speed up afterwards. Cool. Thank you for building out that epic. I appreciate that. All right. Dark mode side of things. Jeremy, how's things looking over there?
It's good. The blog post went out. Social's been sharing that. Good feedback. As far as actual work on it, like when I talked to Chris last week, my focus is also design tokens.
Okay.
And because we're not going to realize any dark mode benefits unless things are tokenized. And so that's been my focus. I can say that Sasha continues to work on larger like product areas that are non-system and applying tokens. So for MR things or whatnot, different views, different pages, the CRUD component, things like that. He continues to work on some of that. We've done a little bit of light design work on uh, toggle, for example, is one component, but as far as
Mhm.
other components, not not anything else until we get tokens applied.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. And hmm, so are we looking to get the tokens applied like in pajamas or in the UI kit or fixing all of this GitLab CSS stuff? Like what is the specific piece that you want to make sure we get landed before you return to the design side of things?
What I'm been tasked with is in the UI kit and
Mhm.
then creating MRs um, to fill up any gaps. So
Okay,
like an
perfect.
MR I've got to create in GitLab UI today would be for like severity colors
Mhm.
that are Dan and I've discussed those quite a bit. So helping also fill those gaps so that as we migrate things to tokens, we've got availability to make those changes and
Yeah,
identify gaps there. So
that makes sense. Okay, cool, cool, cool. All right. Any other things to talk through on the active projects we've got going on? All right.
I do have a
Yeah.
question about dark mode and like some of the process work. At one point, are we going to prioritize like, oh, designer workflow needs to be X, visual regression testing needs to be X, UX research needs to be X, like so that we're like supporting those with greater, larger things. Because if we just release it and it's the Wild West of applying it, I think we're not going to be doing ourselves any favors. So I just wonder when we'll be prioritizing those types of things. Not to mention making sure that GitLab UI and pajamas can both reflect these, tokenization and dark mode states accurately.
Yeah, we've got an issue to ensure that the doc sites can support dark mode. Um, Scott had said some of it kind of already works, but we need to do a little bit more. So I forget the details, but it's in our backlog somewhere. As for the rest, I, I'm biased towards doing something before trying to document it. So we have a notion of, you know, picking a team, making sure they've got capacity and working with them to add tokens, make sure that their pages look good, and then we can figure out kind of, how does testing need to work for both like regression and usability testing. Um, but I feel like we need to get into it a little bit more before we start trying to define guidance because we will learn so much more just by being hands-on.
I think that's fair. Some of it, I think we could just handle up front, especially from a design perspective. If we
Mhm.
just said, "Hey, design for now, you're only designing in light mode,"
Yeah.
I think things like that, so that we don't have designers trying to pull in these things and do things that we have no support for.
Yeah. I mean, that's
So
certainly a fine recommendation for the moment. And in theory, if everything holds, if they design in light mode, they're going to get a good dark mode experience, assuming that it's implemented accordingly, right? So as long as they're not veering off the path of like using standard components and standard layouts, it should just work. They should have a high quality dark mode experience as well.
Yeah, potentially. I know designers like their files go back, and I know as far as like updating things and old components, uh, they're not going to get any of those updates unless they're doing new work. And
Mhm.
so, like any of their old designs, they're not going to really be able to convert to dark mode. And so it's that like moving forward. So
Yeah, it's a good distinction. I'll have to look at that that you shared, Dan. Oh
I'm curious
yeah.
about like plugin updates too. I don't know if that's like a act considered like an active project for the Figma plugin.
Yeah, I know Ian is actively working on it. I haven't heard an update, but I know he's working to move it forward. Yeah, so it sounds like next milestone we do need to prioritize, as I think Dan commented here, like let's get somebody to work with us. We can start having those conversations in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be able to validate and try out a lot more of these concepts.
Yeah, I'm with you, I think, on this, Jeff, in the sense that I'd like the documentation to come out of learnings rather than the bulk of the documentation to come like preemptive or guessing. Um, but to do that, we do need to make sure that we've got the space to create those documentation
Yeah, for sure.
and like a shared responsibility within the team to um, try and capture all of these things as quickly
Yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I'm aligned with that. I, what makes me nervous is if we're just like, hey, this is available, we allow dark mode and design without any type of guidance. So it's more of a let's set up some initial guidance, like, hey, just continue designing as you've always had, continue doing research as you always had. We're working with other teams to flesh out the other parts of the process, as far as all the nitty gritty and day-to-day design work. But otherwise, that's kind of my deal, is more that preemptive, so that we don't get, oh, it's available, like I'm gonna go use it, and then we end up like having a lot of design debt now because people are using it incorrectly or whatever. So,
Yeah.
or just work on the team like, hey, I'm trying this and this doesn't work. Well, you're not supposed to use it yet. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if we're going to aim to do a soft launch of the UI kit updates, the end of this milestone, maybe we could listen for initial feedback, check for whatever's broken, and then when we feel comfortable, we can announce that, and also say like, "Hey, this is a thing now, but largely like ignore it; it'll be fine." Share that in our like UX and various design channels, and um, build off of that to partner with others, and then document it somewhere somehow in pajamas or in our handbook wherever it needs to go. Does that make sense? Look at all those thumbs. Oh my God, the approval. Awesome. Okay. Um, so I think last on the list, Vanessa, you had a note in the discussion topic.
Yes, although I don't want to discuss it now, but rather mention that there is a discussion. I know I think this is a discussion which is way better in written mode and async. And today I also tagged just the whole team because I thought it is engineering, but it's also design, and then I wasn't sure who will I actually reach if I just link foundations design system, probably everybody. So I also mentioned it here. We technically have a problem or can have a problem if we link design tokens to the same context design tokens. For example, if we say the button danger secondary active should have the same design token as button danger color focus, there can technically be a problem. And in the note that I made, I have written it really from a developer perspective, where I was like, can we just not do this and then we don't have a problem? But this was really from a developer point of view, and I also can counter argument with myself again afterwards, that it also does make sense. But if you would like to keep it, we technically have to work on it to make sure that it actually works, to prevent circular things that not active points at focus and focus points at hover and hover points at something. But I actually rather think it's a design decision, not a dev decision. And yeah, there's a discussion link, and whoever wants to discuss it with us can do that in this issue. And it's an open merge request regarding for button dark modes, I think. So it has a bit of an urgency to it. So we can merge this merge request.
Very cool. Thank you for raising that. All right. Any other topics for discussion? Any other blockers, things that y'all need to be effective over the next week or two before our next sync? Very cool. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.